the facts really quickly if I can. I think they are important. So what I was able to uncover is that on May 17th or 18th of 2002, I believe the 18th, Steve Scalise attended a conference called Euro in Metairie, Louisiana, at the landmark Best Western Hotel. It's important
when he was in office, right?
He was a state representative in District 82 at the time.
This was his district where he attended, right?
I'm not actually sure if it was I haven't looked up the district boundaries, but it's in the same general area.
And it's actually District 81.
District 81, sorry.
Yeah, and it's right there on the border.
Duke was District 82, so they're...
No, actually Duke was 81 also. They weren't in
the same district, actually.
They weren't? You sure?
No, they were. I've looked this up, and I think someone actually had to do a correction. You may have... Yeah, there was an article that said that they were in the same district, and they've since had to correct that.
Okay.
Anyway, so we know about Euro is that it was an organization that was started by David Duke, of course. David Duke, you guys know probably more about him than I do. You have much more institutional knowledge about Louisiana politics than I do, but he was actually in Russia at the time, and they simulcasted him into this conference. Euro is a recognized hate group. It's been recognized for several years. It was recognized as a hate group, well, perhaps more than a decade before this 2002 conference. The local representative of Euro, the local chapter person, was a guy named Kenny Knight, who's made it in the news a few times recently for conflicting statements that he's made to the media. Kenny Knight lived 4 houses down from Steve Scalise on Jefferson Heights Boulevard for a long time. They should have. I believe that they were familiar with one another, and Kenny Knight's associations with the white nationalist and neo-Nazi movement were very well known to pretty much everybody in that community, and indeed to people like the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they had been known for a long time. This conference, the Euro conference, was essentially a quote-unquote international conference of white supremacists, and although I've spoken with people who have been to these conferences before, been undercover at these conferences, and according to my sources, it's very clear what these conferences are about. The dais has Confederate flags draped over it. There is a neo-Nazi logo that they use. There are concession stands set up that sell neo-Nazi paraphernalia, literature, etc., and that the general audience there would be, I think anybody would recognize that these people are white nationalists. So I hear your point, Jim, about just agreeing to speak to anybody and everybody. I think this is a little bit different, because the moment he would have walked into this hotel, he would have been aware, and he should have been aware prior to that, because he lived so close to Kenny Knight. And as we know what David Duke has said, although I will say this, David Duke has been known to lie, be somewhat of a pathological liar, and definitely unethical. Went to jail only about a year and a half after this event for ethics problems and for defrauding the tax, I think tax fraud, I believe. So take his word with a grain of salt. But he has said that that Scalise was coordinating and in close touch with Kenny Knight. Kenny Knight, by the way, also is worth noting, was David Duke's campaign manager for a while. So I guess I just see that there's a little bit of a difference between having coffee with people casually who are constituents and addressing a very well-known, nationally well-known, indeed internationally well-known hate group. And I think I'm not saying that Mr. Scalise is a racist in any way. I've never asserted that. I think certainly this speaks to a huge, huge lapse in judgment that's worth the public's attention, particularly considering he's the House Majority Whip and the third most powerful man in Congress right now. So,
now let me pause you for a second. Trying to look at this thing from a chronological standpoint. When I first read your piece, I think the day after it came out, I was left with this overall impression that that Scalise had been in, that he somehow attended this event at the Landmark. I knew that the Landmark was closely associated with David Duke, that Duke had some events there, and And as I appreciate it, and we're talking about when the article the column first came out, that there were some people some statements on a website, a neo-Nazi website, that confirmed that Scalise was speaking at this event. And so the way that you approached it, whether you were right or wrong, but the way that you approached it was based upon the information that you had from the Reeds, as it's been published, Robert and Gilda Reed, mother and son, who had run against Scalise. Gilda had run before against Scalise and lost. But you got the information from that. You look at this information on the internet. You saw this website and statements that were made on the website. And in your first column, you concluded that Scalise had talked to this group. And there was no other issue other than the fact that Scalise talked to this group. Am I correct about it? Is that where you left the...
That's right. I mean, I was very clear that he reportedly talked to the group because I took those statements online, and there were two different statements from the same commenter who was at the time a very prolific contributor to this website Stormfront, which is the oldest sort of neo-Nazi forum on the internet. These comments were made. One was contemporaneous with the event. It occurred. The comment was left about a week after the event, and the other one was about 2 years later when Scalise was again running for another office. I don't know if this would have been re-election for state rep or exactly what office it was, but it was, we should support this man. He spoke to our conference, and the tip that I received from the Reeds wasn't actually specific to this Stormfront article. That what they had told me is that they had just heard rumors that there was a photograph of David Duke and Steve Scalise together. And I had spent the last, after they told me that, I'd spent about 3 weeks attempting to locate this photograph, knowing that it was, a photograph sometimes is worth 1,000 words, right? Not been able to locate that photograph, but was able to find evidence that, yeah, indeed, he had attended this event. And I thought it was worth sharing to the public, and I was very careful to say that this was just reported, and when the congressman confirmed it, I was, now we know indeed that it wasn't just an alleged allegation that was made on a neo-Nazi forum. It actually did occur. Okay,
now there's an argument, and we'll get to there in terms of the time sequence. But why don't you, before we get to the argument, why don't you tell us about what that statement said on the Stormfront website, the Stormfront website?
Well, the original comment was made, like I said, in mid-May or late May of 2002, which would have been about a week after the event. And it said that Mr. Scalise had attended the event as a state representative and had spoken about various issues, including a slush fund that he wanted to eliminate. And I believe that the poster called it the Housing and Urban Development Fund. No such fund actually exists. I think he was a little confused about that fund. And generally just was positive about Scalise's attendance. These hate groups like to talk about, they historically always have, they like to name the politicians that patronize them or show up to their events. And this is not something entirely unusual. I mean, Haley Barbour, for example, attended CCC meetings years and years and years ago before the Republican Party had sort of told their elected officials not to do this. And we know, I mean, it's been part of, David Duke got 39% of the vote in 1991 and 55% of the white vote. So there is a constituency that obviously some politicians would hope to appeal to, and it wasn't too surprising to me to verify it.